So I've kind of noticed as time has gone by, woke has become basically a buzzword for the right wing. It used to be, by and large, that being woke was considered to be that you were progressive, that you had an ear for progressivism, or at the very least you were awake in terms of the um, the sort of abuses that women, black people, LGBTQ, and all sorts of other minority groups within either the United States or throughout the world would be facing. Nowadays, it seems to be a catch-all term for anyone talking about anything about race, specifically to complain about those people doing that. And I want to go ahead and talk about this within media because, oh boy, it does seem to be that a lot of people use this phrase "woke media" to refer to anyone and anything that is a minority or woman within this framework. I think it's time for us to go ahead and start using a completely different phrase for this. And the perfect phrase I think would probably be apt here is corporate progressive pushing, or CPP, as you might imagine. Um, it's fairly apt, I think, and fairly self-descripting, in all honesty, but let me go ahead and reel it back here and explain what it is I mean by that. What I mean by corporate progressive pushing is when corporations attempt to create a piece of media which inserts a minority character within that media who, for the most part, is entirely meant to pander to the sensibilities of progressives simply by having that character within there, while at the same time hiding the fact that the script, the acting, whether it might be the voice acting or the actual acting if it's live people, the plot itself, or even the writing is just very, very bad. And that they will use this as sort of a trick, if you would, to get people to think that's going to be good in order to get you to turn in, when in reality you realize, oh, wow, this is actually really shitty. Take, for example, the Halo bit there. There wasn't really much progressive pushing whatsoever in there, so I wouldn't really call what's being done with Halo to be anything like this. But in case if you haven't imagined or whatever, that there was like a huge turn off in the very first episode of this. This is a primary example of what it is I'm talking about with bad writing. They utilized the trope of having the UNSC basically turn on Master Chief in order to get him to, well, turn on them, and oh my god, his memories are wiped and all that stuff, and when in fact there isn't, when in fact they could have simply written the plot better by having it so that way Master Chief doesn't have his memories wiped, and he is simply starting to question the direction of the UNSC, one which it's no longer a defender of humanity, and trying to make it so that way the human species can continue to live and exist in this galaxy without comparable threats to its existence, and is instead becoming oligarchical, controlling, and servicing certain interests that might be financially motivated by and large. I think that would have been a far more better way in which to portray that as a writing process. However, thus far, the Halo stuff seems to be working off of tropes, and badly created ones, by the way. But that's just an example of bad writing. An example of good progressive writing, by and large, would be something like Recess, for example. If you've ever seen the show, or the cartoon named Recess, it's actually got quite a bit of diverse characters in there. You've got white people, you've got black people, you've got Asian people, you've got Latinos, you've got Hispanics. You've also got a colorful cast of characters, which by and large might be certain stereotypes you might see on the playground and with kids and whatnot, but the stereotypes don't really define the person. They look like a stereotype, but when you actually watch the episodes, you figure out that these are more like flesh and blood human beings. They act in a certain way in accordance with their own biases, with their own thoughts, And they even have their own opinions in many ways. Opinions that clash and differ, and they fight with one another. And this is, by and large, I would consider to be fairly progressive. In fact, there's like a classic episode that kind of teaches the problem, if you would, of capitalism, and about how free markets don't really work in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's good progressive media, I would consider, or at the very least, it's good progressive pushing. GBP, if you want an acronym for that. Corporate progressive pushing, on the other hand, is the 2016 Ghostbusters. Now, during the entire lead-up of that, real quick, and this is or another example would probably be High Guardian Spice. Take either one there. But anyways, both were basically pushing up this notion of, oh, it's the woman or the female version of the Ghostbusters and whatnot. Instead of it being just a version of the Ghostbusters with mostly a female cast. And they were touting off on how, oh, this is the first black female character in the Ghostbusters universe, or this is the first woman lead character in the Ghostbusters universe, and it wasn't really about the quality of the writing, or they weren't even talking about the quality of the plot. They weren't even going on about how they believe this will actually bring in a lot of good fans and whatnot. And in fact, that they were even going out of their way to be antagonistic towards anyone and everyone that might even have a problem. Not just the Chuds, mind you. The Chuds obviously deserved a big pushback in this sense. In fact, when the movie released, it wasn't as offensively quote-unquote woke as the well, obviously it was woke in the way in which like conservatives consider it, really, but it wasn't corporate progressive pushing in that regard. In fact, if nothing else, it was more ableistic given the character of Kevin, but I digress. Point is that they baited everyone. And same thing with High Guardian Spice and whatnot. A lot of people were angry with High Guardian Spice being produced as Crunchyroll, primarily because they believed that the whole process of generating funds would go to Japanese animated studios to create original content for Crunchyroll. And when the advertisements came up, well, this is basically what they look like.
This show has a lot of heart that I don't think would have come through from any other studio.
One of the things that really attracted me to the position was the opportunity to do traditional hand-drawn 2D animation. Not only do I get to go back to the art form that I truly love, but I also get to create a studio from scratch.
High Guardian Spice is about 4 girls who live in a magical city and are going to school to become guardians.
It's funny, and it's warm, and it's adventurous, and they're letting us make it a little bit weird, so that's very exciting.
There's an authenticity to it and a sincerity that's just heartwarming.
It's a very modern reflection of the world. Our characters are really diverse, our cast is really diverse, and that's one of the things that excited me the most about it.
People are really excited about what the show is and what it represents.
The fact that Crunchyroll Originals is doing this as a 2D animated series, it's giving us an opportunity to do things artistically that a lot of other shows and other studios really have forgotten how to do.
We are 50% female in all the creative roles, and our writer's room is 100% female. I mean, this is what my whole career has been about, is trying to get those voices in there that are not being heard.
I don't think anyone has seen stories quite like the ones that we're going to tell.
I also wanted to go ahead and add that this show is totally shit. Like, I'm not even exaggerating on this. They ended up putting in JPEG files into the show of actual objects that should have been created for the show. I'm not even kidding here. Go look it up. So yeah, there's really not much to say in this regard here. I think it's pretty self-explanatory what it is I'm trying to communicate here. If a show pops up or a piece of media pops up and they're talking about how, oh, they're doing the first this or the first that in reference towards insert minority character here or insert marginalized portion of the population here, then it's probably going to be shit because they're not talking about the production quality of the movie, about how, or of the show, about how hard it was to find characters or how easy it was to find an actor or someone to portray these characters, I should say. The way in which that the thought process that came up when creating this series and whatnot, what the series is about. No, if it's not about that, and it's only about we have the first this or the first that in terms of representation and nothing else, then chances are the show is going to be engaging in what I'm going to be calling from here on out corporate progressive pushing. Not sure if that's exactly something that you would agree with, really, because, there might be exceptions to this rule, but as far as I'm aware, most shows, most movies, most series that tend to do that tend to engage in this whole corporate progressive pushing of pretending that they're pandering to progressive values when they're really not, and they're actually utilizing as a bait simply to get you to watch the first 2 or 3 episodes so that way their ratings will go up, up, up. And especially in the way of streaming services as well. They want to get you to click on their apps and they want you to sign up for the streaming services so that way they can go ahead and tout that this show was a success, even though they're only showing the numbers for the first couple of episodes. So yeah, for the most part, that's a bit of a problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem for the entire industry, by and large, because there are shows that are really good that might necessarily be doing what I'm talking about. But as I said before, usually that's a 1-to-1 rule.